Through the lens of Fox Television, or even through the lens of CNN and MSNBC, what does it mean to be a human being living at this time in history in the United States? And what does it mean to come into community together, to support each other during hard times? Not to turn on each other, not for it to be all about, I'm going to get mine. But what does it mean to be about us, about creating a world that can work for all of us? This is one of the most powerful things to me about the Occupy movement that's different than a lot of the other protest movements. Because it got to the heart, got to the soul of what it means to be a human being. One of the things that happened after that big 2008 crash for a lot of people, I think, is that people were suffering, but they were suffering in silence because there was shame attached to being without a job. There was shame attached to losing your home that you had worked so hard for. There was shame if you came out of school, or you couldn't get the school you wanted because you couldn't afford it, or you come out of school with this huge student debt that you can't pay down, and you figure it's your fault. So these are people who played by the rules. They worked hard. They did everything they thought they should be able to do, and yet their lives were falling apart around them. And people at first stayed home in isolation because they were ashamed, I think. One of the things the Occupy movement did that was so important was that, no, this is because the system is rigged. It is not your fault. And we can solve it, but we can only solve it together. So that's why this gathering is so important to me, because we are also a community. These communities are all over the world, all over the country. And only by working in these communities together can we solve these kinds of problems. So just like any community, a community is not made up just of a series of speeches. So we're not going to be that kind of a conference where we just have a series of speeches. We're going to have two major parts of the conference that you will be setting the agenda for. And we're going to have art, just as we had spoken word. We're going to have art, we're going to have more music, and we're going to have celebrations of all sorts. And we're going to have lots of chances for people to get to know each other. We, the group that put this on, don't really know what will come out of it after today. This is the end of our planning process at this point. So whatever happens next will be because the people in this room created. So I want you to think about that we're going to have these two open space sessions, and you will have an opportunity to determine what is on the agenda for this group of people. And I'll explain that more in a minute. So just a few things on some of the issues that have been affecting us nationwide and how they've come home to Kitsap County. Many of you know that there were demonstrations outside Bank of America buildings and Chase Morgan buildings. People were involved in moving their money out of those big corporate banks into local banks and credit unions. We think that's a really important part of the solution, and that we can get our local economy going when we buy local, when we invest local, when we bank local, when we support each other locally. So that's one area that we might want to think about today. And we have some local farmers and some local vendors here who